Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
And today we're talking Witcher. We're not just talking a little bit of Witcher. We're talking a lot of Witcher. We're talking everything Witcher today.
At least that we individually have consumed.
Yes, exactly. So we definitely want to cover the newest Witcher movie. We want to talk about The Nightmare of the Wolf that just came out on Netflix, a full animated Witcher movie, which to be fair, I did not see coming. I did not anticipate them being like, yeah, let's make some animated movies about this, even though Netflix has been very heavy in their animation budgets. They've been throwing down. They don't care. They want to throw down that money. But let's start off with the history though, before we get into Nightmare of the Wolf and the Netflix series and the books. And of course the games, because this is really quite the encompassing series.
Yeah, it's definitely a multimedia franchise at this point.
Yeah, Deshaun, what's your history with The Witcher? Because you got me into The Witcher, so that's my history of it.
Yeah, I started with the games all the way back on Witcher 1, like the original first CD Projekt Red game. It was years ago. I was probably maybe early high school when I had first played it, back when I had like a decent PC that could play it.
So you played Witcher 1, though?
Witcher 1.
Witcher 1, which...
I started with the original game.
Which most people, I would say, have never played Witcher 1 and 2. I would say I'm one of them. I'm not shaming you guys. I'm not
Most
saying...
people I know, sure. Witcher 1 has that inaccessibility because it's PC only. Witcher 2 at least came out on the 360, so a lot of people were able to play it that way. But Witcher 1 is just like, if you don't have the PC to play it, then you just can't play it.
Oh man, I need my Stream Deck so I can play the rest of the Witcher series.
Just map all your buttons to the Stream Deck. You know what? The Stream Deck, come to think of it, would actually be good for like MMOs. All your hotkeys.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, like, I mean, not to derail, but I'm thinking the Stream Deck is that like retro machine too. You know, like you play all your old Steam games on it because it can. You know, it can play it at the highest settings of your old games. You know, like be able to play Empire at War at an Ultra. But beside the point, we'll be able to play Witcher 2 on like and Witcher 1 as high as you can pump it. Witcher 3 on the Stream Deck, we'll see. It worked great on Switch. That's where I played Witcher 3. And let me tell you that, I mean, you were the one being like, oh, you might not get some references. I don't feel that way. I went into Witcher 3. I definitely didn't want to go into the game blind. So you told me to read the first book. I listened to the first book on Google Play. I didn't use Audible at first, but I switched to Audible because my wife's not using her credits, so I'm gonna use those credits. But basically, yeah, I listened to the book after you told me to, and then got into Witcher 3. But you've been playing since the beginning.
Since the beginning, that was my introduction before I'd even realized that it was an adaptation of a book franchise, because it's always interesting to have that from an adaptational standpoint, where it doesn't have a show yet, doesn't have a movie yet, but it was adapted into games. And the fact that timeline-wise, the games are supposed to take place after the books, so they're sort of like in their own little bubble where they don't have to contradict anything. Yeah.
I didn't really know that. That's cool. So you don't really, I know in Witcher 3 they have missions that harken back to the original books, obviously, but obviously it's way afterward is what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, the Witcher 3, jumping into Witcher 3 right off the bat isn't so much that you'll be confused if you haven't read the books, because I hadn't read the books until like recently. I've read like 4 out of 4 of them. I have like 3 more to go.
I'm only
but more so that it is, especially later on, it is the third game in a trilogy. It's paying off a bunch of subplots that have been building since the first game. The Wild Hunt has been this like looming threat that you're like, you're gonna confront at the end of this trilogy, and that's the entire point. So there is a lot of stuff, and it's all sort of references, and like as soon as you start the game and you have that sort of conversation with the king, and
Yeah.
they ask you all those questions. They're literally asking you, what were your important decisions in the first 2 games?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
they're
that's
doing.
cool. That's cool. And you know, like that, I totally get that. But as somebody who wasn't into The Witcher, and maybe you're a new fan coming into The Witcher, and you've just seen the Netflix series, and you're like, Henry Cavill's pretty hot. Just play the games. It doesn't matter what order, when, if you got your hands on what, just play, because this, and I don't say this lightly, Witcher is a top caliber RPG. Like,
Yep.
literally shoots to the top, like 10 RPGs I can think of, you know, like absolutely no question.
And I was like the only person I know who was really just like, hey guys, The Witcher though.
It's cool. I like it.
Hey guys, The Witcher 2 is better than Skyrim and it came out half a year before it.
I can't vouch for that. I won't defend his statement there because I love my Skyrim, but I do think that Witcher 3 fucking punches Skyrim in the fucking throat a couple times. You know, like if you're talking about a game that's advanced, if you're talking about a game that like you're like, man, I love Skyrim. I'm having such a good time.
Mhm.
Fucking go over and play some fucking Witcher 3.
Yeah, that was just my first reaction because you had told me when you were going through Witcher 3, you're like, wow, this is better than Skyrim. I'm like, motherfucker, 2 is better than Skyrim. And that was years ago, same year.
But you know that everybody always compares every RPG to Skyrim, you know? Like that's the way it is.
Yeah, it's really annoying.
It's really obnoxious. but at the same time, it has to be said, you know,
Mhm.
like if
But
people want a benchmark, you know?
how well Witcher 3 did was always interesting to watch because it went from like this sort of almost niche franchise to a global success where most people just jumped into the third game, and it really put CD Projekt Red like in a certain spotlight for better
In
or
a
worse with like
Yeah,
with like Cyberpunk.
we should obviously get into that a little bit, but like yeah, it took them from being just kind of a side studio to being like fighting with the big boys, you know,
Mhm.
like hoping see like putting out Cyberpunk was supposed to be the fucking, you know, the Bethesda killer, the fucking, you know, like it was supposed to take down so much, you know, like, and obviously
Yeah,
that's not what's going on.
there's a lot of variables going into Cyberpunk, mostly for pressuring a developer to release a game before it's ready. It's just like, well, you bitched and moaned and sended us death threats. So here you go. Why is
Here
it
you go.
unfinished? Well, we told you it was unfinished, but you kept bugging us about it. So here you go. You better wait for the patches. And to be
It's
fair,
so
I've
true.
mentioned this before. In my playthrough for Cyberpunk, which I still haven't finished just because it got fucking buried under a bunch of other games.
Yeah, and I want to say I
Uh
never finished Witcher 3. I want to say that now. I put 50 hours in. So I'm not like, "Oh, I played a little bit." It's like I put in more hours than I would for many other games, you know? Like for many, and for most people more than they put into any game, you know? Like but like I still haven't finished it. I want to go back to it. It's not like I'm sitting there being like, I don't know, like with Breath of the Wild DLC, I was like, I don't know if I want to go back and finish off the Breath of the Wild DLC. It's like Witcher 3, I'm like, let's fucking go. Let's go. We got 50 more hours. Let's fucking go.
oh,
Like,
the DLC for Witcher 3 is fantastic. Blood and Wine
and bloody man.
is the shit. Just a whole new place to explore, great story like on parallel with
Main
the actual
story?
like main plot. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Just like it feels like it has some high stakes and like emotional payoffs. And there's a lot in Blood and Wine specifically. There's like a lot of callbacks to the books.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, they must have known that they were getting popular at that time. They're like, we should probably bring them up some more.
Mhm.
Like they're like, eh. But basically, yeah. When you think of the books, when I listen to the books, the first book is exactly what they adapted for the Netflix series. So if you want to start to get into the book series, it's going to be a super easy read for you if you watched the show.
Yeah, the first season covers the first 2 books.
Yeah, and they definitely change some things.
Mhm.
Definitely, even right from the get go, where they're changing around how the wizard interacts in the first story and how it
Yeah,
works, and like
like his dynamic and a lot of changes I feel like could be determined just by it was clear the show didn't have that much money thrown at it, so they were working with what they had.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because so obviously Netflix is always searching, and Prime and everybody's searching for their next Game of Thrones, their like
Mhm.
series that's gonna carry them through the next
Yeah,
fucking
as
10 years.
like at the time like this episode will be releasing, like the Wheel of Time, the trailer for the Wheel of Time just came out yesterday.
Exactly. Everyone's looking for that franchise. And it's funny because they all don't put the money down for the franchises. Like even Invincible, which they threw a shit ton into the acting budget, obviously they got the
Yeah.
cast for Invincible. They didn't have the money for the animation, obviously, in some places. And you're like they should go back and fix that. Like they
Yeah,
should give them some more
time and
money and fix that.
resources.
And
It's
and
an
I
important thing.
and I think that's very apparent with The Witcher, where they were like, okay, we spent a lot of money getting Henry Cavill for you, and obviously this is a fantasy, so you get lots of money, but it's your first season. You could get canceled, just like, there's so many fantasy series they've tried to pull the trigger on at Netflix. I feel like Netflix is the king of trying to grab random series and failing them completely. Thank God that even though they do some changes in the Witcher TV series, I do find the show incredibly enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I like that they changed the pace of it to be like, oh, it's a jump back and forth, like a little bit,
Yeah,
like
that was definitely probably its biggest criticism, even more so than like its effects at times, was more so just how it was told. Like that nonlinear format seemed to throw people off
it
and
really
confuse
did.
people. But I think it definitely helped that I like read The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny first, and that's also told nonlinear.
Yeah.
So it's all just like segments and sort of vignettes of Geralt's adventures. A
And I
handful of them are just dark retellings of old fairy tales and fables.
And I think that's kind of why they went with that feel for the first season. They're like, the book readers already understand this is not like this just happens, like whatever timeline, what time this is, it doesn't matter. It's just happening. You could tell this is old Geralt, this is young Geralt, like that's how the books work. And they definitely try to capture that in the show, but I think that it's funny because I heard a lot of people being like, "Oh, I didn't understand it was like a different timeline at first," and I was like, "What? What do you mean?"
Yeah,
Like,
it's pretty evident.
you're like, "That's
Things are
ridiculous."
jumping around. It's just
uh,
it is one of those things where like it might be on the audience just a tad, because if you pay attention, there are context clues, usually in dialogue or just setting, as to when this might take place
yeah,
versus where the other scene you just watched took place.
but it's like I think it's the problem with the format of Netflix is that Netflix knows you're binge watching. It knows you're just hopping to the next fucking show, and
Mhm.
you're just being like, oh, what's this new thing that Netflix is pushing at me? And some people just kind of like wander into shows on Netflix, and then if they like it, they like it. And I think a lot of people were just wandering into The Witcher, just being like, I like Henry Cavill, he's Superman, and
Mhm.
then and then they had to actually pay attention for a second, and they were like, oh shit,
Yeah.
like wait, hold on, what, this is a novel, like hold on a second. um,
And it's told in that format? How dare they?
I gotta give credit to the show for a lot of things. First off, great makeup. That I think that Henry Cavill brings a lot of physicality that he brings to Superman. He brings this like impenetrable look and feel to Superman, and he brings a lot of Geralt's like confidence in
Mhm.
in everything that he brings to this role, and I think that's very important because you are competing with not only people in people's mind, the Geralt that they read in the books, but the Geralt that they played in the video game for hundreds of hours. Like people, if
Yeah.
somebody beat it or several of these games, like that.
And
That
they do have like their own distinct quirks. Not to the point where they feel like completely different characters, but there is like a different flavor of Geralt depending on which iteration you choose.
And it's funny, Geralt's got some appeal. I was hearing a story the other day that this girl's working at GameStop, and this old woman came in and she was like, "Do you have more games like this?" And she holds up Witcher 3, and she's like, "Oh, what did you like about this game so I could find other games that like it?" Then she just deadpan looks her in the eye and goes, "Geralt." And you're just like, you're like, "Ah, yeah, okay, yeah, okay."
I need more like this. I need that fix. I got an itch.
The like the thirst trap of Geralt. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, I definitely give credit to the show for that, is that they like is that the books feel, and I'll say this is my main criticism of The Witcher, is that it definitely feels male fantasy-ish, you know, all like
Yeah.
for a lot of it, you know, like where it's like, of course, he's a badass. He looks great. He can turn into like a fucking animal, basically. He's got magic. He kicks every monster's ass. He fucks all the ladies.
Yeah.
He's mean to the king, you know, like it's all these things where it's just like he's an absolute badass, you know, like, and it's like it's definitely one of those things that like I'm glad the show changed it to be also female fantasy at the same. So it's just like the book is very male fantasy. The show's very like, what if it's all fantasy? What if we have dragons,
Yeah,
sexy people, and more sexy people?
there's a little bit of that, and it's also because the books later on do get more into like Geralt's actual like vulnerability and his
Yeah.
flaws, as opposed to just like, I'm a witcher, I'm main character, I ain't got no problems.
Nobody fucking with me.
So it's definitely channeling more to like that later characterization of just like, no, he's got some problems. He's got this whole fucking thing with Yennefer. That's just what you're gonna get a lot of.
Yeah, of course. So, which I'm totally for. I really do like The Witcher a lot because in general, because like the series, because they really, like Hellboy, really lean into ancient myth,
Hmm.
folklore, anything, and like and I mean anything. They got in The Witcher 3. They have Greek monsters. They have Roman monsters. They have
Hmm.
Chinese monsters. They have monsters from Thai legends. They have Irish goblins. They have like, you know, like it's literally tales from all over the world. Like Hellboy sort of sticks to Europe. I want to say
Yeah.
Hellboy is more Europe centric. He definitely reaches into the East with China and Japan, and he does
Hmm.
fight a few like, you know, like shins, like ghosts, Japanese ghosts. I forget what's the name for it. You know it.
Not right now, I don't.
But basically, he sticks to Europe, and I think that Witcher is very, with its monster pulling, it doesn't care, you know, like it almost doesn't matter if it breaks any rules or anything, you know, like it's just like, here we go. Yep,
Yeah,
this works. Come
it
on, bring
sort
it
of
in.
has the built-in excuse in its lore from the jump that like every monster that exists in the Witcher universe have invaded from another dimension.
Yeah, which I
So
think
you're
is
just
quite
like
interesting.
okay, sure, whatever. We could
It's
just do whatever we want.
it's funny they have such like a sci-fi explanation of the universe, but the whole thing is fantasy, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's all magic and
Well,
monsters, but
it's easy to like dress it up in like in like a fantasy clothing by just simply being like
it's a
it's in
dimension.
from other realms, from other worlds, as opposed to actually using like more contemporary language like another dimension, an alternate timeline.
Yes. And it's funny because that way they have excuses for Geralt to pop in to anything, really, because they're
Hmm.
just like, he could go to another dimension, you know, like and they
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
they did that for Soul Calibur. They were like, here
yeah,
he
they did it
is.
for Soul Calibur. I'm sure that's the excuse for him being in a Monster Hunter World.
Yep.
And even in The Witcher 3, because they talk about how Ciri in that game was an adult at this point, also has traveled through other worlds. It's heavily, heavily implied that she went to the Cyberpunk
Yes.
2077 world.
Yes, and they even imply it in Cyberpunk at some point. They
Yeah.
like bring up Siri, which I think is amazing. You're just like, hell yeah, let's fucking go. Like let's open this
As
window.
comic book nerds who are just so brought up and just like so full up with like multiverse stuff. Now that like mainstream culture is sort of like latched onto that now, you're just like, good, about time, let's go.
Let's go.
Like I remember when you and I were both in college, and I think it was one of your roommates who was just like, so have you ever heard of multiverse theory? And you were just like, I read comics.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I feel like it's one of those things that like a lot of people, they see Rick and Morty for the first time and they're like, wow, I never even thought of multiple universes and infinite possibilities springing off into multiple things. And I'm like, bitch, Infinite Crisis came out in the 80s. Like, like you're like, fuck, we've been talking about this forever. Like,
Yeah.
like fucking hell. And it's so true. And it's kind of funny that like we live in a world now where What If is a major series coming out on Disney Plus, and they're like, and they finally got the fucking chutzpah to be like, Doctor Strange fucking destroys the universe. Whoops. Like,
Yeah.
they're like, oops, I did it. Oops. But beside the point, I think it's a smart way to be able to, like you said, kind of break any rule they want for whatever type of legend, myth, folklore, anything really, to bring into this universe. And you know what? It works so well. Like this, it's literally one of those things where The Witcher could do this, and it could just be this hodgepodge of crap, like it could just be, oh, they got monsters but it doesn't make any sense together, they don't look like they blend. They do such a great job of character design and monster design in these games, that's just astounding. And then they change it up and they change up the design but keep kind of the general feel for the movie and the show.
Yeah.
They
The Netflix iteration is in this interesting spot where it's definitely leaning more towards the books more than anything.
Yeah.
But certain like aesthetic cues and like choreography, they're definitely just like those games though.
No, absolutely. Like there's some like spin moves he does where you're just like, he never did that in the book. you're like that's a game
although
move.
to be fair, like if there's one thing that Geralt does a lot, and I want to next time whenever I read the next Witcher book, I'm probably gonna have like a tally of every time Geralt does a pirouette. He does so many pirouettes all the time with the pirouettes.
But I mean, to be fair, he's trying to get a point across, is that like Geralt doesn't move like, it's not a big hulking thing. It's
like an
graceful.
awkward knight in heavy armor trying to just like tank at you. Like it's just he's nimble and like graceful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's definitely one of the, I think in the books you get a couple Witchers, and in the show you get a couple Witchers.
Yeah, because lore-wise,
game,
there aren't many Witchers left.
So when this new movie came out on Netflix, Nightmare of the Wolf, which is young Vesemir. So this is the guy who trained Geralt.
I had forgotten that it was supposed to be about young Vesemir before
I forgot
it started
this was
getting
supposed
advertised.
to be a movie. When this was advertised, I was like, hell yeah, we're getting a Witcher animated show. And then they were like, it's a 2-hour movie. And I was like, fuck me up sideways.
It's an hour and a half.
Hell yeah, put that shit on. I watched that like the minute it came out. I was like, hell yeah, let's fucking go.
Yeah. But then once it like came out, it's like, oh yeah, this is about a young Vesemir, which is interesting because you haven't even met Vesemir yet because you only read The Last Wish. And
yes,
Vesemir,
so I've only met him in the game,
yeah,
Witcher
so
3.
he's at the start of 3.
Yeah.
And like he pops up later on, but he's not in The Last Wish, and he's not in the first season of the show.
But he's obviously like Geralt's father figure, like he's it, like he's.
I mean, you'll see him when we get season 2 because that's doing Blood of Elves, and Vesemir's in Blood of Elves.
Who'd they get? They got somebody good.
No one I recognize, I don't think.
No, I thought they got. There was like big news that they got somebody for it. I'll look it up when we talk about young Vesemir. But basically, I think that I think that's the major draw for this animated movie, is that first off, it's an animated Witcher adventure, which means like the games, they can do whatever the fuck they want. They can do any monster, they can do a shit ton of monsters, and you're like, hell yeah, let's go. And then the other great thing about this is that you get more Witcher action than you've ever gotten in than I've ever seen. But I
Yeah,
don't know about you.
it's definitely like we've talked about this many times on the show about taking advantage of the
Of
medium.
the medium.
Like the moment you make something animated, the moment you have a lot more freedom to just go kind of balls to the wall as far as like action is concerned, especially with a franchise like this, in a way that you wouldn't necessarily be able to replicate in the same way for the show, the live action show.
Yeah, exactly. Which I feel like they try. I feel like I feel like one of the best examples is the swamp fight that with the what's the monster that's in the bog with him that shoves him under the bog a bunch of
Yeah, I
times.
know what you're talking about. That's like early on.
That's very early on. They do such a good job of animating that creature that makes you be like, okay, we got some
Hmm.
money. We got some money here. Like, it's only later on that you're like, where'd the money go? Like, where'd the money go? Did you lose it? I'm trying to find who they cast as Vesemir, but I can't fucking find him anywhere. So I'll have to Google it at some point. But but the cool thing about this, of course, any animated movie is that they go balls to the wall, and this movie does.
Hmm.
I think that's my basically my review of that movie is that they went balls to the wall and they didn't have to, like they could have just been like, here's a Witcher story, cool, right? Like like they definitely could have just done that, like been like, hey, here it is, here's a
Yeah, but
short
instead
story in the Witcher
they
universe.
they decided to touch on something to my knowledge hasn't really been touched on in the actual like proper, I guess you could say, canon. Because I don't know if the books have any like young Vesemir stuff. The games definitely don't.
Yeah. And this was, I mean, it's cool to see young Vesemir because like you just have old grumpy Vesemir in the game, and like, and you're like, of course he was a badass when he was younger, but you're like, how'd this happen?
Hmm.
Uh, and I think they did such a good job of being like, here's a different Witcher, like this is not Geralt, like this is different.
Yeah,
And
he's
but in the
a lot
same
more
way, similar.
rambunctious.
Yeah, rambunctious, but in the same way that like a lot of other Witchers, bow out of their morality, and they and like Geralt and Vesemir are in the same where they kind of realize that they can do better.
Hmm.
Like they can be better, they can make better, as the movie ends with, make better men to better
Yeah.
men, and I love that sentiment. I To be fair, okay, that basically the Nightmare of the Wolf, way better written than I expected. The cast does a great job. There's definitely some moments where the animation falters, like a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's a fucking movie, like, so it's not like, you got a whole thing. It's not like 20 minutes and they messed up the 20 minutes. It's
Yeah.
like
I didn't find anything too egregious.
no, it's
But
definitely not. Um, what are some early Netflix like CGI shows? There's a lot of them, and like some of them just don't look good. And
yeah, but
this looks quite good.
this also looked a lot better in places than like Scorpion's Revenge because it was the same
Yes.
studio, Studio Mir, who also
Oh,
did
really?
Avatar. Yeah.
Nice. I Yeah, and I want to say that if it's the studio that brought Avatar, you can kind of see it in the faces.
Yeah.
Like, is that the expressions that Vesemir has the whole time is absolutely astounding. They do such a good job of getting a lot of expression out of his character almost constantly, which is
Hmm.
very important in animation, not only in games but in movies. Is to like constantly have that human face change. Like that's why you probably are watching here on YouTube, is that 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 you can listen on any podcast platform, small plug, but you can see our fucking faces change expressions on the video, like,
Yeah.
and you
You could read
understand that, like,
you can read someone better that way.
exactly, and they feel human. And that's why everyone always jumps for the live action adaptation of something. But I think they do such a good job with this animated movie of keeping Vesemir always expressing, like
Mhm.
he's always doing something with his face, either being disproving, like putting up the eyebrow, especially in that. I think the best expressions that the best piece of animation probably, and there's several really great animated moments in this movie, but obviously the circle shot that they have, that Netflix is starting to be like, give me that circle shot, give me that circle.
Put
They
it in
like
every advertisement.
they're like, do it, like, because they did it in Castlevania and they were like, we're doing it in this. Like, they're like,
And
we're doing the same shot.
And there's a little crossover there only because Theo James plays young Vesemir, and he was
Really
Hector in Castlevania.
nice.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
I
I'm honestly surprised that this movie wasn't animated by Powerhouse, because it seems like every time they want to do something animated, they're really tapping on Powerhouse for stuff.
they know. They're like, hey. They're like, maybe they got a contract or something like that. Maybe that's Netflix was like always going to them.
Hmm.
And I think Theo James does actually a really great job. I was kind of curious why they didn't go with, some bigger names here, but I was actually really surprised and loved the cast of this. I
Yeah.
think everyone did a great job. I think that Carrie Walgren,
Kari.
Kari Walgren, who plays Kiko, is that, did I say that? Kitsu, sorry, Kitsu. She's the really big star here, I feel like, out of everybody on this list.
Voice acting wise, she's like an industry vet. Theo
Right?
James is sort of kind of still an up and coming actor. Definitely live action
because he
wise. He's
did
starting
the
to get more
whole
voice
Divergent
bits.
series. He was the
Yeah.
guy at Divergent. He
Graham McTavish is also like Vesemir's master, and he's like one of those actors who like
I didn't
always
realize.
has.
Hold on, this is kind of wild. I
What's
didn't
up?
realize Theo James plays young Vesemir in the Witcher show. It says, like, there's a young Vesemir scene. That's what they say on IMDb. It says he plays young Vesemir there. On the
I do
actual
not
Witcher.
remember.
I don't
do not
that
remember a
either.
Vesemir scene in season 1.
Right? I'm gonna have to fucking go back and see that.
But Graham McTavish also plays his master, and Graham McTavish is one of those actors where like he always leaves an impression whenever he's in something, even though it's always like a bit part. Like he's in Creed as Ricky Conlan's like trainer.
Mm-hmm.
He's in God of War 4. He's King Atlan in Aquaman. He always like
he's
has
Fergus
a presence.
and DuckTales.
Yeah, he's also Dracula in Castlevania, so that's another Castlevania alumnus.
That's wild. So yeah, they basically were like, "Hey, Castlevania cast, I got another thing for you." They were like, "Here you go." But basically, I want to say right off the bat, because I saw some people leaving some bad reviews on this movie. Shut the fuck up.
What were they complaining about?
They're basically complaining that people are messing with the story, and that they're like, Netflix is now making things up, and you're just like, no.
Oh, it's like, so the canon police. You can always depend on the canon police showing up for every fucking fandom.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, and like a lot of people are saying that it was simple and predictable. That was a lot of like the people shutting it down, and I'm like,
I mean, yeah, there is some of that, but it's just one of those things where like I'm not expecting The Witcher of all things to like blow my mind and subvert my expectations for something.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like
I'm not sure what you wanted out of this.
Yeah, and maybe we haven't read the short story Nightmare of the Wolf or something, and they're messing with the story.
Yeah, but like maybe it's something that's actually in the books and they just didn't adapt it well or something.
But to me, I had such a good time with this that I am not upset at all. Like I want to say that, like, other than Witcher 3 and the books, this might be the best piece of Witcher media, like, because the Witcher show is good, but the little changes upset me a little. Like, not a bad way. Not in like oh my God, it's not like the book. I'm upset. It's just like sometimes I'm like, that could have been better and had more impact, and you took out the impact, like, which, like, you got to do some changes for live action, but there's little things in the show that
And
make me go like,
yeah,
that could have been better.
I do wonder how much that would have shifted had you not read The Last Wish before
Right.
you had seen it.
Right. I also wonder that too. I also wonder how I would have handled just watching the show. I know a lot of friends of mine who just watched the show, never played the game, never read a book, nothing. They just watched the show because the show was on Netflix, and they liked it a lot. They, they were like, "Wow, this is great. This is some great fantasy." And I was like, "Okay, all right," but I agree because first off, they're doing a decent adaptation. They're changing some things,
Yeah,
but
I think any of the changes they make are just like changes they sort of have to make. Like
yeah,
I think specifically like near the end of the series with the episode about the Jinn, which in the book is so much of a bigger scale. Like the Jinn literally ravages through an entire town and stuff. And here it's
yeah.
just kind of limited to like one
The room.
space.
Yeah, I wish
Because
they kind of got out of the house a little more, and you could tell that the budget kind of restricted them there.
just like we ain't got the money for that, but we also can't not do that story because that's literally
pivotal.
The Last Wish. That's that story.
You're like,
Kind of wish we had the Beauty and the Beast story from the first book. I love that bit.
Yeah, right. Me too. I do like that bit. Maybe that'll be in season 2. That's the thing is they've already messed around with the timeline a bit. They can kind of change it up how they want. I gotta say that that what I'm trying to say is that The Witcher show is good. The Witcher show is solid. I think that they get the feel of the books right. I think they get the feel of the games right. They do a good job at adapting, but you can hear my language here. They're trying at those things, like they're like, oh, we're trying to make this happen, which I feel like I have, like you said, the budget for season 1 wasn't huge. So my hopes for season 2 are actually a lot higher, because Netflix now knows it's their franchise. They know they can make money from it.
Like the reason we got an animated feature out of this is because that first season, in spite of its shortcomings, did super really well for them. But it is funny. I remember, I forget who it was. It might have been Darren Mooney or like some other like critic or like film scholar I follow who was like, the weird thing about Witcher season 1 is that it feels like Netflix doing a show that would have been on like Showtime in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the feel where
it has that like feel.
It doesn't dip into CW category. Like, please don't. I see a lot of criticism of that. They're like, this is just the CW-cation of my Witcher series, and you're like, you're wrong, because this actually has integrity and doesn't have extra drama for bullshit like CW does. And I think that they basically say that because the costumes, but I think the costumes are pretty spot on most of the time.
Yeah, but it's just one of those things where like it's still solid, but it has that sort of show made in a world before Game of Thrones feel to it, but still fun, if not a little silly. Like I saw a lot of like Xena comparisons. I'm like, I do sort of get that.
Yeah, like exactly, because that's kind of the way it is, like he finds another monster every week and he just fucks up that monster, like, and he finds a different thing and usually there's a twist. Like it does, and it's kind of Xena, you're like, it's kind of
sure.
You're like, it's sort of, but I do want to say that like I think that season 2 is going to be a step up. I think that and again, guys, this is my podcast. This is our opinions, so if you have an opinion, please comment down below. If you think you're like, they ruined Nightmare on the Roof, please let us know why they ruined it. Please comment down below, because really, I had such a good time with this.
I thought it was fun. It wasn't necessarily anything integral or anything I really needed, but for like an adventure starring young Vesemir, which is something I haven't encountered in like any of the media, although maybe I guess I missed it in season 1. I found it a lot of fun. Yeah,
and I think that's just because, first off, the music is bopping, fucking slaps. I don't know who did the music for this, but it goes hard at points, and you're just like, hell yeah. The animation is solid. I think, yeah, again, I think there was some moments where I was like, but there was definitely moments where I was like, that looked great, you know,
Yeah.
like, and the moments that look great, the spinning shot, the attack on Karamoran is so good because as a guy who hasn't read far into the books or played a lot of the games, I've only played 3 where you see Karamoran and you're like, wow, that's fucked up. And they just say like, yes, many people hate the Witchers and have come to try to destroy us over the years. And you're kind of like, cool, so you've been attacked a bunch. And then this movie's like, nah, it was one attack and it fucking sucked. Like, they're like, it was awful. It was a whole thing. But I think the fun of this is that you get a small Witcher story at the beginning. You get the like, you know, him taking down a lich. It's not a lich. It's like a combo. It's like a combo of some monsters.
Yeah.
That's kind of this whole thing is that there's some combo
like
monsters
hybrid,
here.
like mythical creatures and stuff like that.
But they do break out directly from the games. The griffin, is it the griffin that Kitsu breaks out that attacks him?
Right at the start, basilisk.
That is pulled directly from the game too. They do such a good job of being like, it's the basilisk, you know, like you're like, hey. And also that's definitely one of the better I mean, all these fight scenes are pretty darn good, but this is one of the better fight scenes here where where they fight the basilisk, because they break out a lot of shit here and you're like, hell yeah. Like,
yeah.
Hell yeah. I definitely think that it's what's going on is that people are getting weird about their adaptations and what they're getting as adaptations, you know, like,
yeah.
I think that's my problem with the reviews.
I'm sure there's
that I see.
I'm sure that deep embedded gatekeepiness is also starting to like rise up, just like, man, Witcher was for me and now it's for everyone and I hate it.
Yes. And I think that's exactly it, is that it's probably the same reaction all the Harley Quinn fans had when the Harley Quinn show came out. They were like, they're taking my Harley Quinn and they're doing this. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you haven't read a fucking comic in years if you think that's how Harley Quinn is not written. You know, like, you're like, come the fuck on. You haven't read any Paul Mahdi. That's how I know. It's like when you have a Punisher sticker on the back of your truck. I know you haven't read a fucking Punisher comic ever.
Yeah.
If you have a Punisher sticker on the back of your truck, I know you haven't read a fucking Punisher comic.
That's
it's like,
that is really funny. But it is like one of those things, and we've brought this up before, mostly in like we went into this a lot with like the definitive Batman episode.
Yeah.
The whole like public perception of a particular character and the iconography associated with that character versus what that character actually is.
Yeah, and I do worry about The Witcher's like reputation going forward, because like I said, it is a male fantasy, and I worry these same people who are like, yeah, punish these people. Well, those same people will be like, yeah, The Witcher hunts down monsters like me, you know, like, and you're just like, okay, bud.
Well, you can't help any franchise. You can't help the ones who just overproject or just misinterpret those things. It's just unavoidable. You're gonna get the weirdos.
But I do have to say that, like, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, if you're a Hellboy fan, if you're a fantasy fan in general, I absolutely recommend the Witcher series in every form.
Especially for old, like, mythic tales, like, before they were sort of, like, put through, like, the sort of pop culture filter. Like, those old, esoteric, very grim, like, fairy tale stuff. Then you'll enjoy this more.
Because if you've ever been like, oh, what's the true story of Snow White? Or what's the true story of, like, and they, like, tell you the original tale of the original grim fairy tale.
You know, Disney Cinderella was okay, but I hated that the stepsisters didn't get their eyes pecked out by birds at the end. I don't appreciate that as an adaptational change.
If you're one of those people, go play the Witcher games, go play it, because they will take every dark turn of the fantasy that you could think of, and they do it. You know, like they're like, here we go.
Two still holds up pretty well. You could
Two
jump
still
back
holds up.
into it. One is a little rough, but it is old, like early 2000s old, so it's gonna
So,
have like those kind of warts on them.
yeah, you're just gonna shuffle up to people and ask for quests, like,
Hmm.
yeah. And I'm sure there's no
But
fast travel.
if
So
you're already like a Bethesda fan and one of those people who really like Skyrim, then par for the course because those games that are never really about polish.
no, exactly. And I got it. I will say for Witcher 3, I have run into some bugs, but I don't know if that's just the Switch version, you know? Like I don't know if it's like
Witcher 3 when it first launched was pretty buggy because,
it's gotten much better.
that's just like the Western RPG standard at this point. But it has gotten a lot better. I never ran into anything game breaky or like
I
crashes or anything.
I have not played since The Witcher's updated on my Switch, I think twice since I stopped playing. So I think
Hmm.
they've fixed some things too. And I will say that, like, with all the uproar of Cyberpunk and everyone being like, you launched a fucking launch game, blah, 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 I'm gonna sue you. These guys, even if something's wrong and they put it out, they fix it. You know, I
Yeah,
absolutely.
it sucks because CD Projekt Red has always been one of those more generous developers that are just like, "Oh, we like to provide you like content. We don't like to screw people over as
Yep.
far as like taking what's supposed to be in the main game and just cutting it off so we can sell it as DLC later. Like we like to provide you a lot of good content and we'll patch
EA,
what we can and we'll be attentive." They're like one of
Star
those
Wars.
developers because they're small. Like people think they're this huge AAA developer
Yep.
now because Witcher 3 did so well and then Cyberpunk had like a lot of it being like kind of unnecessary hype drawn
Mhm.
towards it, like it was supposed to be bigger than it was.
Yeah. You're like,
But yeah, they're one of those smaller guys and sure, I think stories like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk have like put more out there into the public consciousness the idea of like crunch time and how
yeah.
developers are sort of like pushed to rush out things like this. But like this is a systemic issue that's in the entire industry, and you
Oh
can't
yeah.
like label all the entire blame just on CD Projekt Red. It is everywhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that crunch time, of course, happens in everybody's job, and I think it's even worse for the gaming industry because of the way the deadlines are handled. You know,
Hmm.
like is that they are very set, and like in the film industry, yes, like you know, deadlines are set. You got to pull weird hours sometimes to do weird things. I got to shoot in like a week that we have to be up at 4 a.m. to do the shoot, and then it's over by 11 because we're doing British times. So you know, it's okay, and but it's not that bad because it's one of those things that, like, you know, people ask for weird things and you got to deal with it, but like then there's just abusing your employees, you know,
Yeah.
like there's because I'm doing at 4 a.m., but they're keeping me at a hotel so I don't have to be like a long way from there. But like,
Hmm.
you know, if you just make somebody work in like a 12-hour shift, bring them in for the next 12-hour shift and do that 7 hours, 7 days a week, they're going to die. Like not
Hmm.
only burnout, but they're not going to produce good work, you know,
Yeah.
like they're like, and I think that's very important that everybody can experience burnout no matter how good of a company you're working
Yeah.
for. And then to be abused is worse.
And we also have to remember that like video games as a medium and as an art form is still more or less in its infancy. It is
Yeah.
very, very new in the grand scheme of other art forms.
Yeah, and
So,
even film is new, guys. Like, I
yeah.
mean, we love film, we study it all the time, but like to be real, film's like 120 years old. You know, like it's not even that fucking old.
Mhm.
Like it's not, and when you're talking about painting and drawing, it's like that's an art that's
So you're always
old as
going to go
hell.
through like humps like that, and the video game industry is still relatively young.
Mm.
So this is one of those things where you can work towards to be better on the whole, because it's not as simple as saying like, it's never really as simple as saying like, "Oh, I don't like the way this company's doing things. I'm gonna stop playing their stuff." I'm just like, well, if you applied that same logic to like any AAA video game company,
Yeah,
you'll find that your library is going to get a lot shorter if you start boycotting people.
it's true. It's true. And I mean, I try to boycott the companies that really are quite abusive. We've talked about it before with EA. I just don't buy EA games right now.
Yeah.
I just don't.
I mean,
do
I
it.
was in college. I was going through a period where I was boycotting Capcom for like 5 years.
Yes, I
Between like
remember that.
Marvel versus Capcom 3
I
and
remember
Resident
being
Evil
like,
7,
I'm
I
getting
just
into
play
Monster
anything.
Hunter, and you were like, Capcom.
Fuck Capcom.
You're
Like,
fuck them bitches.
after MVC 3 came out, I was just like, nah, I'm done with y'all.
I'm done with this
And
shit.
was done until Resident Evil 7 came out.
That's super funny. Resident Evil 7's like, welcome back, son.
Just like, damn it, this is good. That was one of those things where I went into that begrudgingly because I had like played the demo and I was just like, damn, this looks really good. And it feels like they're finally getting back to the point of what made Resident Evil good. I'll play the demo. Fuck, that was really fun. I think I'm going to end up getting this game.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, we talked about the Bethesda thing last week, and already I played some Overwatch this week. I couldn't fucking help myself, you know, like I was just like, but to be real, and I think this applies to CD Projekt Red too. The artists that made these games are not creating these bad situations. They're just making the art, you know?
And that's another thing to think about with both video gaming and the film industry as well, is that it's never just one person. This is
always a team
collaborative
effort.
medium. Yeah.
It's always.
So it's tough, but you got to pick and choose your battles.
Yeah.
You can boycott Chick-fil-A if you want, but you might also have an iPhone in your pocket. So you're like,
yeah, exactly.
You also might wear Nikes. So you're like, as they say, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, but you know.
We said it. We fucking said it. But it's true though. It's like but I think fans voicing that they will want games without the crunch, you know, they'll want games whenever they come out, you know, like, because yes, it is upsetting that like another pushback for another movie or another pushback for another game. But like we've said a billion times on this fucking show, I want it done. I don't want it done now. I want it done.
Yeah, that was the thing. Every time a Cyberpunk, like I stopped paying attention to the Cyberpunk delays because I'm just like, whatever. I like CD Projekt Red. It'll be done when it's done. Every time a delay would come out, I would just see the fucking rage about it online. So in a way, when it did come out and it was relatively unfinished because they kept like pressuring them to like put it out, and then they finally put it out and people were pissed about it, there was part of me, it's just like, especially since I've played through it and haven't really run into anything huge, it is one of those things where I'm just like, it's kind of what you deserve.
It's kind of what you deserve. It's funny because I don't know why, but Death Stranding's coming to my head when we talk about this, because it's such a good antithesis to the crunch game, you know, like to where it's a game that almost doesn't make fucking sense, you know, like it doesn't, like Konami, like I mean Kojima really auteured the shit out of that game, you know, like
which I still haven't played, but I've like seen a bunch about it. Now that the director's cut of it is coming out, goddamn it, Kojima.
Get that.
Yeah, once I get a PS5, I'll probably just wait and play that version. But it is one of those things where, like, yeah, you're gonna get something like that, and it's one of those things where like people got sold on the hype or like the proof of concept of just Kojima having full creative control and this crazy game, Death Stranding. What's it about? What is it? I don't know, but it's Death Stranding. I'm excited. I have no idea what's happening, but I'm excited. And you oversell yourself and you overhype yourself on something, and it's one of those things.
Because it's like, funny because it's a
part of that
reaction.
Part of that is on the developers, but at the same time, they gotta sell a game, so they're gonna say whatever they want. But on the other hand, like part of it is on you.
Yeah. So why I bring it up is that you have CD Projekt Red, who puts out Cyberpunk, and the reaction is that it's not done. It sucks. You know, like, even though it's what they wanted, you know, they wanted that first person Cyberpunk fucking adventure. But Death Stranding, they finally get it, and it's just a weird work of art, you know, like a literal, like, dissection of what makes a game, you know, like of being like,
Yeah.
you're just walking, like, but you got to bring a thing to here, you know, like, and
It's
it's
like,
like,
but you're just doing a thing for here to here. You're just doing like busy work. I'm like, yeah, like you do in a lot of games. That's the
it's
thing. Like,
funny.
and Kojima has always sort of been that way. He loves to get like real subversive, like
Real
metatextual
meta
stuff.
shit.
Like the entire conceit behind Metal Gear Solid 2 is that it's a sequel about how monotonous and repetitive sequels are.
You're like, wait a minute.
In the same way that like BioShock Infinite did something similar, where it's just like, isn't it weird that we're sort of repeating all the same steps? And it's one of those things where like it's almost like the main character can sort of see behind the
Yeah.
curtain, and it's just like nothing is real. This is all just on repeat ad nauseum forever. We have no control or agency. So,
Fuck.
but yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2 is wild.
But that's what I mean, is that like, so he got to spend as much time as he wanted to put out Death Stranding, and now he's getting a director's cut too. You know, like this is like the absolute creative control. And I'm not saying if that game's good or bad. What I'm saying is it's an art piece, and it's funny how like the popcorn that was given the people has died. You know, like the players have fallen off on Cyberpunk, but there's still a weird community of Death Stranding fans that just constantly play it, and you're just like, yeah, it's
I'm
so
I'm
weird.
sure it's one of those things where it's just like it strikes a chord. Look, video games are an art form,
Yeah,
and sure, it's not something that artsy isn't something you would expect for a game thrown with that much money thrown at it. But it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, and whenever you do get something like that, because you can compare this to film, you get like
yeah.
something that has a lot of money thrown at it, but it's a little too artsy. Sometimes it doesn't resonate. Blade Runner 2049 bombed
Or
at the box office.
even the Green Knight, a more recent
Yeah.
example, where it's like we're gonna go a little bit artsy, and the critics were kind of like, you know, like.
But I want popcorn movie
want
all
popcorn.
the time.
If you want
But
popcorn, go see
but
Shang-Chi.
you'd expect it from like an indie game.
But
You'd expect an indie game to probably be artistic or like lean in
right.
that direction a little more.
Exactly. Like there's so many that are coming out on Switch. They're just like straight up like that one that's just the isometric islands, and you take pictures of the things on the island. I forget what that one's called. They showed it off in the indie showcase before. And I'm just like, wow, what a weird fucking game, you know? Like or a game I played recently, Town Scraper, which is not even a game. It's a toy where you just get to build a little, like, there's water, and you just build a little like island town. And there's no like points, there's no nothing. It's just a thing. And I heard a lot of reviews, people being like, this is stupid. Why can't I gain points? Why can't I progress? Why can't I get more things? And I'm like, because it's not a game. like
Well, or it's just one of those things where like game as a definition is broader than you might think it is.
yeah.
It's why I can't stand, like, I avoid the term walking simulator because I think it's a really reductive term. Because it's just one of those things where like games are an art and you explore art through different ways. It's not as simple anymore as just saying like, well, the point of a game is to be fun. Just like, no, game is an art. Sometimes the point of a game is to challenge you or frighten you or sort of turn things on your head in the same way a movie
The
can
Witcher
be, or
3
any sort of story.
is a great example of that too. Is that like The Witcher 3 is one of those games that lets you play however you want. I think most people will say that they went into the game, they started playing, they're having a good time, and then they played their first game of Gwent, and they were like, fuck me sideways, I gotta play shit tons of this. And that's what I did.
You.
That was definitely me. That's probably like 30 hours of that gameplay. No, I'm just kidding. It was like 20 hours.
I did almost like every quest in The Witcher 3 and like skipped almost all the Gwent ones.
Really?
Yeah, I was just like, I just didn't care.
I'm a, you know me, I'm a sucker for a trading card game. And I'm like, ooh, a set card game that you can't buy expansion packs for, and it's just in this game. Exactly what I wanted. I'm such a sucker for trading card games like that, where you don't need to go online to buy more packs or something. It's just all in the game, like Slay the Spire. Or recently I was playing Dicey Dungeons, and I know you're playing with dice most of the time, but they have like a section that's like a card game. And I was like, oh shit.
Did you play like the straight spin-off Gwent that's on mobile?
Yes, I did play spin-off Gwent, and I dig it. But like I said, I try to stay away from trading card games, and that even means Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Magic, I try to stay away from those guys because they put out new expansions all the fucking time, and I don't have the money for that. I don't want to have the money for that. Basically, I've grown out of being like, I want to be at the top edge of my Magic card game so that way I can place 15th in the fucking draft.
Mhm.
Like, you know, like, I mean, the highest I've ever placed in any draft was like 4th, you know, like, so it's like I've never even like got prizes, you know, like it's one of those things that I love
How
card
much
games.
it's an investment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I appreciate a game that's just set, done, complete in its everything, you know? Like you don't need to buy a
And plus
bunch
there's
of
a
other
whole
shit.
and plus there's a whole ass huge Western expansive RPG
Right?
in here with
Right?
as well as an in-depth card game.
Isn't that
So
wild though? Like I think that's the craziest bit about Witcher is that like the Gwent's stupidly complicated and well done. And then there's still the rest of the game, and you don't even need to do a lot of the fighting in the game. If you wanted to play it like Skyrim style and just go around and hear some fucking stories, like you can. Like
yeah,
it's wild.
it's that openness that makes it accessible. It's the same reason why we've established on the show that I'm not really much of like a multiplayer guy.
Yeah.
I love my single player narrative driven games. I love me a good story. Tell me a good goddamn story. But
Oh, that's a big surprise for this show.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I've said like I've put so many hours over the years for GTA Online because of that sheer amount of freedom. I can
Yeah.
go in. What am I in the mood for? Do we want to do a death match? Okay. Do we want to race? Okay. Do we want to fucking do a heist? Sure. Do we want to play golf or tennis? Sure. Let's do that.
It's funny. I mean, we're way off topic, but like, I started playing Sonic Forces, and you were specifically like, "Don't fucking buy this game. Don't fucking do this. Like, don't get this." And I think it's funny that you of all people told me not to do this because we're talking about wanting a story, and I do believe Forces really tries to bring a plot to this. You know, like
Not well.
not well, but it tries. Like, no, I'm not saying the script is good at all, but it's one of those things that you're going into the game looking for that fun narrative experience, and I went into it being like, I just want another Sonic game.
That's
you know?
most
Like,
that's most of the time. But when you're talking about something like Sonic, that's relative to that type of
yeah,
universe.
of course. It's not like you're going in being like, what the fuck? This doesn't have some deep, dark plot? What the hell?
Sonic 3 and Knuckles was all right, but the lore didn't go deep enough.
It's like, yeah, exactly. Like,
And with
yeah.
Forces, it was less that. It's like one, Forces is bad, especially when directly compared to like its two predecessors.
I'm not
two,
even.
and two, it's because you own Mania and it still remains unbeaten, and you're jumping into shit like Forces.
I can't beat it.
Mister,
I can't
I'm
beat
on
it.
the last stage. Turns out I'm actually only 2/3 done with the game.
I can't beat it. I can't beat it. I'm just gonna leave it be. No, I'm just kidding. I'll go back to it. But it's funny too because even in Forces, I can't, like, I have a hard time getting S rank in some of the 3D levels, but the 2D like side scrolling levels, I get S rank every time, and I'm like, I'm much better at these side scrolling Sonic
God.
levels.
The classic Sonic levels and Forces control like fucking garbage.
Oh
compared
yeah,
to
no,
Generations.
the whole. I will say that the Forces commits the ultimate, and it does it intentionally. It does the ultimate Sonic sin where it stops you from running to fight people. Like, you know, like you literally stop and pull out a fucking gun and waste some people. Like that's just not Sonic gameplay. You want to keep moving, and they constantly stop you to fight people, and you're kind of like, that's not what this is, guys. You should cut this the fuck off. That's my only major complaint is that, like, yes, it controls like butts constantly, so I constantly go off the edge for no fucking reason. But it is that they commit the ultimate sin of their game design. Their game design is run fast as Sonic, feel that momentum, feel that rush. And then they're like, stop completely, shoot a robot, and then pick up his things. And then
it's a balance. You get like a give and take. Like here's where you get to just have fun with speed, but here now you got a platform and pay attention. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
It just speaks to like intention in game design.
No, it's true.
Just lead this all the way back to The Witcher because we like went way off base.
Well, even to lead more off, I think a great example of how big a small thing in game design can change is the difference between Doom 2016 and Doom 2020. Is it 2020? Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal. So basically, the difference is that you have this run and gun Doom like classic scenario where you're just ripping fucking monsters apart. But then they also in Doom Eternal they introduce another classic Doom element of having to hit monsters at specific areas. And that one little change to like try to make it harder changes the entire gameplay of that game completely. It does not play the same. It does not work the same. And I'm not saying it's wrong because it's still a great game. Doom Eternal still plays fucking awesome. I think it does a great job at what it does. But it's different. And I think a lot of different fans of 2016 will go into Eternal and be like, this isn't the same. What's going on here? And that small tweak of being like, oh, you got to hit this guy exactly at that red spot when he turns red, instead of just rip, tear, go through everything, which like, I think that's a small game design change that completely fucking takes you somewhere else. And I think that to bring it back to The Witcher is that if we're talking about the difference between like Skyrim and this is that they like do those little quality of life changes, that little story changes, those little steps that take this from just being another video game you're playing to being an immersive, full-on story experience. But sorry for going off on a game design fucking rant, guys.
This is what happens when we talk about a multimedia franchise,
right? Yeah, it's true though. It's fucking true though.
It's not just as simple as just The Witcher. It's just like, again, there are the books, there are the games, there's an animated movie now.
Yeah, I did see there is a Witcher animated show coming. I just don't know what it's about or what.
No, all we're missing is the stage play.
Yeah. I wouldn't even be surprised.
Yeah.
But basically, I give all the credit to the Witcher franchise because, like Game of Thrones, it seems to come out of. It doesn't have a long history, like it's not a fucking franchise that has been around since the 30s, like since the 20s, like this is like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, like this is a sort of newer series, and I think that it stands with the big boys. And even though it can't sometimes falls to the lesser evils of the fantasy, like of the male fantasy output, it's like overall it's able to tell new fantasy stories in a dark, grim setting with a fun character.
Yeah, or take those old stories and sort of recontextualize them in order to make something new out of it.
Yeah. But guys, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Is there anything else? Guys, please let us know anything Witcher wise you want to tell us below in the comment section. Please follow, like, subscribe, move that algorithm. Just do something to it to make it work. Feed the beast. Check us out on galaxygeek.com where you can find all of these podcasts. You can also see any other articles or reviews that we do there. I just want to say thank you guys for tuning into a remote episode. I know this is a little bit different, but Sean got hired somewhere, so he's got a job now.
So I miss the free time.
So this might be it's going to be for a little bit a transition time where we try to figure out what works best for our schedules. So there might be a few more remote episodes like this, but I want to thank you guys for tuning in and for hopefully liking this format, and we'll see you guys very soon. Please check check us out on Instagram and Twitter as Yupfrank
and Mod Karaika.
And yeah, guys, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
See you next time.